A cold October morning in 2001, the world awakened to what felt like a turning point in modern history. The United States had officially launched Operation Enduring Freedom, and the first waves of aircraft roared across the Afghan sky. But what most people didn't know then was that the Taliban regime, a government that ruled Afghanistan with an iron fist, was about to collapse in just a few short weeks, far faster than anyone had imagined. For years, the Taliban appeared solid, immovable. They controlled Kabul, major cities, vital roads, and the daily life of millions with absolute authority. Many believed that toppling them would take years of brutal fighting through rugged mountains and unforgiving deserts. Yet the events that unfolded after October 7, 2001, revealed a different truth, a truth that shocked the world. In the early days of U.S. airstrikes, the Taliban tried to project strength. Their leaders issued statements insisting they were unshaken, that victory was certain, and that Afghanistan had defeated invaders before and would do so again. But behind the scenes, inside dim caves, hidden bunkers, and secret mountain corridors, something entirely different was happening. Something that no propaganda message could cover. The Taliban's communication networks were collapsing. The precision of U.S. strikes disrupted their chains of command, shattered their ability to coordinate, and paralyzed their military structure. This wasn't just bombing, it was a surgical dismantling of the regime's control. In the north, the Northern Alliance, weakened for years, suddenly found strength again. U.S. intelligence provided them with details down to coordinates, weather conditions, and enemy movements. American bombers carved paths through Taliban lines with devastating accuracy. What remained of Taliban resistance was shaken to its core. The earliest signs of collapse appeared in the northern provinces. Fighters who once believed themselves invincible began retreating. Their morale crumbled. The airstrikes weren't just destroying infrastructure. They were destroying confidence, the most critical element in any army's survival. All eyes soon turned to Mazar-e-Sharif, a strategic northern city that was considered the gateway to the rest of Afghanistan. Whoever controlled Mazar controlled the roads to Kabul. And on November 9, 2001, the unthinkable happened. The city fell. The world was stunned. The fall of Mazar-e-Sharif sent shockwaves through Taliban-controlled territories. Reports of retreats, surrenders, and collapsing front lines spread like wildfire. Inside Kabul, whispers began to circulate. Is the regime collapsing? Is this the end? Inside Washington, U.S. officials knew this was the moment. With Taliban defenses weakening drastically, coalition forces pushed forward. Each advance was preceded by devastating U.S. airstrikes, clearing the way with almost mathematical precision. But the most shocking part was not the intensity of the American campaign. It was how the Taliban responded, by retreating, sometimes without even fighting. Their fighters were overwhelmed by an unfamiliar enemy, one that could see them from the sky, track them with satellites, and strike them with precision-guided bombs. Taliban members later admitted that combat felt hopeless, almost suicidal. Cities fell in rapid succession: Talakan, Bamiyan, Ghazni, each surrender faster than the last. South of Kabul, tribal loyalties began shifting rapidly. Power in Afghanistan has always followed strength, and many tribal leaders sensed that the Taliban's power was evaporating. One by one, they broke their alliances with the regime. And so, as Northern Alliance fighters approached the capital, the question was no longer whether the Taliban would hold, but how quickly they would fall. On a cold November night, under the cover of darkness, Taliban commanders ordered their fighters to withdraw from Kabul. Some units retreated in formation, others fled in total disarray. As dawn broke, the world witnessed the moment that changed history. The Taliban have left Kabul. The regime is collapsing. The morning of November 13, 2001, Kabul awakened to a sound the city hadn't heard in years. Silence. No gunfire. No Taliban patrols. No religious police barking orders through megaphones. Just silence. It was the unofficial announcement of what had happened during the night. The Taliban had abandoned the capital. The once heavily patrolled streets were suddenly empty, Taliban banners removed, checkpoints dismantled, motorbikes the fighters used for years vanished. People stepped outside their homes cautiously at first. Then, when they realized the Taliban were truly gone, the atmosphere changed. A sense of relief, unfamiliar yet overwhelming, swept through the population. For the first time in years, women unveiled their faces. Children played freely. Men embraced one another, crying or laughing, unsure which emotions to express. But beneath the scenes of joy lay a deeper truth. The Taliban's collapse was far more psychological than military. The U.S. campaign had shattered not just their forces, but their belief that they could survive. Northern Alliance fighters entered Kabul hours later, expecting fierce resistance. Instead, they walked into a city already surrendered. A commander later said, "We could not believe we took Kabul so easily. They collapsed before we even reached them." To understand this sudden disintegration, you must look behind the scenes of Taliban leadership. Internal fractures were growing. Some senior figures believed that fighting a superpower would bring destruction beyond imagination. Others wanted to resist to the last breath. But the truth was far simpler. There was no plan. No structured defense of the capital. No secure communication. No reinforcements. The U.S. had achieved what every military strategist dreams of: paralysis without full-scale ground war. As Kabul fell, U.S. officials celebrated mission accomplished, believing the hardest part was over. They were wrong, but that reality wouldn't appear until years later. For now, the world saw only victory. Life in Kabul began shifting quickly. Shops reopened, schools prepared to welcome students. In a symbolic moment, an Afghan female journalist spoke live on television, something impossible under Taliban rule. But a looming question haunted everyone. Where did the Taliban go? The answer lay hundreds of miles away, deep in the south. There, in dusty villages and rugged mountains, Taliban leaders regrouped. Their fighters were scattered, but not broken. Senior commanders met secretly, agreeing to withdraw, rebuild, and return. For now, however, the international community believed the Taliban era had ended. That illusion would not last long. When Kabul celebrated liberation, the real story had already shifted south. The Taliban hadn't been defeated, they had dissolved into the landscape. They sought refuge in provinces like Kandahar, Helmand, and Zabul. There, among the tribal networks and mountain sanctuaries, they began crafting a new strategy. Not open war, not defending cities, but disappear, survive, and return stronger. Their collapse shocked the world. In less than 2 months, major cities had fallen: Mazar-i-Sharif, Kabul, Herat, Jalalabad, until only Kandahar remained, their symbolic stronghold. By early December 2001, Kandahar too began to crumble. Unlike Kabul, its fall wasn't through battle. It happened through negotiation. Tribal elders mediated a deal allowing Taliban fighters to surrender their weapons in exchange for amnesty. And on December 7, 2001, the city fell. Mullah Omar slipped away into the mountains with a small escort. He left behind a defeated government, but not a defeated movement.
News headlines around the world declared, "The Taliban era is over." But in hidden camps near the Afghan-Pakistani border, Taliban commanders gathered around campfires, planning the next chapter. U.S. forces focused intensely on the mountains of Tora Bora, hunting Osama bin Laden. This enormous effort gave the Taliban a priceless opportunity: time. And they used that time with extraordinary efficiency. How could a regime collapse so fast, yet rise again? There were three key reasons.
The withdrawal was more strategic than chaotic. Taliban fighters kept their light weapons and regrouped in small mobile units, perfect for guerrilla warfare. The border regions provided natural protection. Remote, rugged, and politically complex, they were ideal sanctuaries. Afghanistan fell into political vacuum. The new government was fragile, divided, and heavily dependent on foreign forces. Taliban quietly exploited every weakness. By 2002, the first signs of insurgency appeared. Small attacks, roadside bombs, night letters left on doorsteps, ambushes on patrols. Each attack reflected a new strategy. Hit quickly, disappear instantly. As the years passed, the attacks became more complex. The movement slowly regained public support in rural areas. Every mistake made by the Afghan government or foreign troops increased Taliban influence. By 2005, analysts admitted what once seemed impossible. The Taliban were no longer a defeated force. They had become a resilient, reorganized insurgency. The fall of 2001 was only the beginning. What followed was a 20-year conflict, the longest war in U.S. history. And so the documentary closes where the story began. In 2001, the Taliban regime collapsed within weeks. But the fall of the government was not the fall of the movement. In the mountains, in the dust, in silence, they prepared for a war that would reshape the world.